And so there's no one right answer for the homework assignment. So however you get it to work, however it makes sense to you is all that really matters. Um, as long as you are using rows and columns and not using a width that is a certain pixel percentage, that's all that really matters. So the point of this homework assignment is not to get to that pixel perfect design. It's more for you to say, all right, someone has given me a mock-up. Can I get my content laid out in a way that looks pretty similar to that? Because based off of that screenshot, it's pretty easy to kind of see how the site content would go in that layout, right? And so that's the point of the homework assignment, is to say, hey, am I comfortable enough creating divs within divs? Do I understand the notion of a container? Do I understand that it's always rows first and then columns second? And then can I get the practice of setting up an HTML file, opening it in my browser and working alongside of it? So a couple of you guys have already submitted assignments and they've all looked very good. The main thing that I really want to stress is don't go overboard, right? So if it is looking 90% of the way there and you're going, all right, I got everything that I mostly need here, that's all that really matters, because that screenshot that I took isn't actually a screenshot. I did that in Figma really quickly, right? I started drawing out rectangles and putting the text in. And oftentimes when we have designs, they don't exactly translate into our code, and that's all right. Oftentimes our code will look better than the design itself because there's a certain crispness to how a browser renders a web page. So the one thing that I will say there is don't drive yourself nuts on that homework assignment. If we are if you're missing something major, if you're going, all right, that really should be taller, or these these columns aren't lining up, that's when you'll start losing some points. But little things like the padding of the text, or if your columns in that 1 through 6 row, which is definitely the hardest part of the assignment, if you've got a little extra gray space on the right side of one and not on the other, or something like that, don't worry about it. Don't drive yourself nuts. Main point of the assignment is, hey, can I practice with rows and columns? And then can I also practice with my CSS applying basic properties? Other than that, that's all we want to see in the homework assignment. So don't go overboard with that. That will be due on Sunday at 11:59. But late homework assignments are never penalized. So if you get something in and you go, oh, I didn't quite get to finish this, and then you resubmit it again later on Monday or Tuesday, I will see that resubmission and bump your score back up. So any questions on the homework assignment before we dive into stand up?
Yeah, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
Is there like a best practice with working with margin when you have rows and columns? Not padding is necessary because it's moving inwards towards the content, but like manipulating the actual spacing between columns.
Yeah. So there are two kind of things that you can look into there. If you're looking for spacing between columns, there is something in Bootstrap called gutters, and gutters are exactly what you're looking for. So that gutters are the Bootstrap approved, Bootstrap sanctioned way of changing the spacing between columns. So that's one thing to look into. The other is the notion of a wrapper. And we often see this in our CSS. Of sometimes we're trying to do too much with one div in particular, and it makes sense to actually go in, put another div inside of our column div, and then style that directly. So that can sometimes give us more flexibility where we're not overriding the Bootstrap CSS. Instead, we're saying, hey, we're going to put all of our own stuff in a div that is inside the column div, and then I can target the CSS inside of there without affecting the grid system that Bootstrap provides for us. So those are two techniques that you can use. Depend on what situation you're in. For column spacing in particular, you probably want to head to that Bootstrap documentation. If you do a search for gutter, it will come right up and you can learn how to use those. But don't go overboard on the homework assignment in that particular area.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I do have a question. It's not really pertaining to the homework assignment, but I've been trying to go live, like, when you're in the actual visual, um, VS Code,
Mhm.
and it keeps bringing up like my old one. How do I get to my current one I'm working on?
Yeah, so that is really important when you go into your VS Code. Um, and you go file open, it's
Hmm.
really easy to like be up all the way up here at the my code folder. And when you open that, you've got all of these files in here and it's
Yes.
easy to get lost. So what you should do instead is when you go to open folder, go all the way down into whatever file it's in. So go all the
Uh-huh.
way down to day 3. And if you're in day 3 and hit go live on that one in particular, it should open that day's code.
All right, let's try that.
If
I'm a,
that doesn't work, we've got something else and you got to share your screen.
all right, let me try it. Give me 1 second. Whoop,
Sounds good. Take your time.
open. See, it opens. Maybe I'm doing. Open folder.
Jesus Christ, I got a force quit code. VS code. It's frozen.
Um,
Same problem.
I don't think it's working for me.
Okay, go to share your screen. Let's take a look.
Yeah, it's not. Hold on, share screen. Hmm. Just share the code or the whole window.
Share desktop 1 or 2. That way I can see when the go live window pops up what it's doing over there. Okay, yeah. So
Okay.
we're definitely a little we definitely have the wrong folder open. So see how you have all of these over here? That's what we that's what we want to avoid. So if I
Okay.
go to why can I not see? Oh, that's why. Um, that's weird. Why? Do you see the word file up there, or is it just floating?
Yeah, it's to the right.
Oh,
No, it's
okay.
there. Right here.
It's a weird screen share thing. So when we go open folder, there we go. Now it appeared. Instead of clicking on this and hitting open, we want to
Mm-hmm.
go all the way down into the right folder here. So we'll go all the way down to week 2 homework. Now you'll see, I'm going to say don't save on that. It will only have these 2 files open. And when we go live
Okay.
on those, it should open the right one.
Okay. Alrighty.
So yeah, just don't open week 2, go all the way down to where you want to be. And then
Mhm.
that way VS Code knows exactly what file to open when you go live.
Okay. So when when it asks that pop up, you said no to that pop up?
I said no, yeah. Workspaces
Okay.
are like more of an advanced feature of VS Code. We won't actually use workspaces. Um, I forget, it's pretty easy to accidentally create one. But if you're ever in a workspace, just hit don't save, and then when you open a new folder, it will treat it like a folder instead of treating it like a whole workspace.
Okay. Yeah, I was having that issue last night. I just had to go and open it from the actual folder and just keep refreshing the page. So I was like, why won't it go live? But okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Any other questions? Okay, in that case, let's go ahead and roll into stand up. What did we learn yesterday?
We utilize div to help differentiate what we're trying to create and on the HTML file.
Yep. And so div is going to be probably the element, the HTML element or tag that we use the most. The whole notion of a div is just a box, right? It is a division of your website that we put content in. And when, we go over day 1 of HTML and go over all of the elements, you think you're going to be using a lot of them. And what really turns out that you're using a lot of is div, because div is probably most helpful for controlling the layout of our website. And oftentimes when we're working with layout, we've got several layers deep to go. So what did we do yesterday to kind of start planning through the div soup planning?
Made the squares all over the screenshot or our design.
Yes. Yeah. Whether it's a mock-up, whether it's an actual screenshot, whatever it is, we do those intermediary planning steps, right? So we get our entire design and we're like, all right, this makes sense, but how are we going to dive into this, right? And so doing that visually first often makes it easier. And then you go to the outline step, right? And if you're looking at the visual and you're like, that's enough for me, great, go right into your code. But oftentimes we want to not dive right in and go, all right, let's do the visual first. Let's break down our visual. Let's take that breakdown of the visual and do our outline. Then when we take our outline into our code, we don't dive right into the content. And that's a personal choice, right? Some people say what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this one little thing looking perfect. I'm going to get my entire first row done. I'm not going to worry about the layout of anything. And then I'm going to move into the next section, right? But I find that it's much easier to do all of your layout first, put in placeholders for everything, and then go back and drop in the content and style it, right? So that's total personal preference. You may say, I like to do everything and then move on to the next big component, or you may say, I like to do all of my layout. I like doing the layout because it's easy to get lost in all of those divs, right? So we also saw commenting for the first time where we're able to add in little comments of this is the end of this div, right? And that can make it easier to figure out where your next one will be. And that's something that you can test yourself on today because we're going to be starting the news website. And I want you guys to start looking at your code. And instead of going, well, he put it on line 14, so that's where I'm going to put mine. Test yourself a little bit. Say, hey, without looking at Max's code, I know what item we're trying to add in. Where do I think that this is supposed to go, right? And that's something that you'll see on your homework assignment of, hey, I've got to do a new row. Let me make sure I'm at the right closing div, but still inside of my container. And that's something that you're going to see on the Netflix site and just about every project that we do, right? Navigating your code, making sure you're comfortable with where those closing divs are will make it much easier for you to put in additional content without all of the layout shifting. And I think you guys started to see that a little bit with yesterday's code, how we can miss one div or we can have one letter in and all of a sudden the layout completely breaks. That isn't an oh crap panic moment. That is all right, before I write anything else in, let me debug that, right? Let me go through and figure out why that layout broke. And that's something that will come with more experience. Is there anything from yesterday that stood out that we should recapture today before we dive into our new project?
We learned more container, and we got into more in depth with container, how container is like, I guess the building is like the building block of everything, right?
Yeah, so think about container as it is the thing that is containing everything, right? So the container is really helpful because, and it's one of those things that just makes more sense visually. If I expand my page all the way out here, you see I have these little the white space to the left and the right. Well, that's kind of nice, right? Because we don't want our content to go to the very edge of the screen or even to just have a little bit of padding. We only want it to be contained inside the center of it. And that's even more important when we get into larger size screens. We don't necessarily want it to go all the way to the edge, especially if there's a lot of text. And the reasoning behind that is if I'm reading from left to right, the way we read English, right? When my eyes get to the edge of this screen, to the right edge, it is less straining on our eyes to only travel over to this point than it would be for it to travel all the way to the edge, get all the way back here. Now I can actually lose track of what line I'm in if I'm going 16 or 14 inches over to the left side. And so oftentimes when we are working on a text-heavy website, we will constrain the width of our main content to only get so big. We don't want to do that on our phones because our phones are only a couple inches, so it's easier for our eyes to track back over to the next line. So that's why we use a container. That's like the visual design aspect of it. But there are also other sites that are more photo based that we do want to go the full width. So this will be the first project that we actually use container fluid on. Container fluid still has benefits of no container whatsoever. It kind of helps the grid system space rows out properly. But container fluid will go all the way to the edge of the screen while still containing all of our content. Anything else from yesterday that we want to touch on?
Well, we also learn a tiny bit of debugging, especially with, like having I think, what is it, 12, right? Because I think I put 11 for coal.
Yes, yes. And so sometimes it's not a mistake in our div soup, right? Sometimes it is just, hey, adding numbers up, making sure that they add to 12, because computer's always going to do what we tell it to do, right? So sometimes we got to look back, and there are multiple layers of debugging. And so that is definitely something that we can get practice at. All right, with all of that said, let's dive into our very first, or not our very first, our next project. So the project that we are going to be working on is a news website, and this is modeled after a very large news website that you've probably been on before. But this is a way that we're going to start practicing with images. We're still going to get practice with our grid system. We're going to get a little practice with our layout. And we're going to get more practice with our divs and keeping track with them with comments. With all of that said, we are going to start with the same process that we did yesterday, right? We're going to start laying these out with boxes to make sure that we know where we are headed before we dive into our code. So I will make a screenshot of this. And I am going to share that. Did you go? No, you did not go into the right spot. Let me try that again. I'm going to go ahead and share that. That is now in the Zoom chat. And so if you would like to practice with preview, you are more than welcome to. If you would prefer to just follow along with me and not do it yourself, that is totally fine. So we're going to start with, and I'm going to increase my line thickness a little bit here so we can see these a little bit easier. I'm going to start at the highest level, which is my container, right? And this is going to be, like I said, the first time that we see the difference between container and container fluid. But because this is going the full width of my page, I'm going to put everything in a container. And 99% of your websites, it makes sense to just start with everything in a container so the grid behaves the way you want it to and doesn't cause any weird horizontal scroll issues. If you've ever been on a web page and there's a scroll bar down at the bottom, and then you're like, but there shouldn't be anything, I shouldn't be able to scroll left and right. Oftentimes a container will fix that problem. So that's why we start with a container. Okay, we move into our next level. I'm going to grab another color for that. Let's pick yellow so that we can see it against the blue. And I'm going to identify all of my rows. So I get a row up at the top for whatever that top kind of headline bar is. I get another row up at the top for my nav bar, so to speak, my subsections. And then it's tempting to go, oh, I've got a row for latest, I've got a row for headline. But believe it or not, this is going to end up being one giant row because we have 3 columns. And this will be the first time that we can see we can actually put rows inside of columns inside of other rows. And every time we do that, it resets our 12 column system. So we're going to see how that works in our code in a second. Okay, now I'm going to go one level deeper and break this up. So I will go to lime green, And I'm going to say, all right, we've got our menu here. And because all three of these are kind of evenly spaced, I'm going to space it evenly here as well. I'm going to try to get 3 even rectangles in here. It came pretty close. Okay, now that we've got that done, we're able to break this out. This is actually going to be one big column. And that is because all of these links in here will just be spans. They'll just be pieces of text that we can put a little bit of spacing on. We don't actually need to break each one of those up into individual columns, because if we did, we may get some weird wrapping going on, right? Col 1s are really hard to fit any content into because they're being divided up so much. So sometimes we actually don't want to subdivide our columns too much. We want to break them up so that they've got enough space to basically breathe. So we'll get into the CSS of how we accomplish that. Okay, now I come in and I go, all right, my latest is going to be 1 row. And sometimes we don't even need rows. Sometimes we can just make it a div. So we only need to make something a row if it is going to have columns inside of it. And that is evident right here. Because we've got our headline and we've got the time, we need to break that up again, even smaller, into the time that that article came out and the headline. And this is where I really regret using some thick lines for our rectangles, but hopefully you can see visually, now we are 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers for the
Hey,
green,
Max,
and 4 for the pink. Yes.
shouldn't latest, the middle section, and the add section be columns?
So for the latest here, we aren't going to actually use rows and columns. We're just going to use a generic div.
I see. Okay.
And so we are going to copy this for our 3 headlines. So that we can capture that. And then we are going to work our way across. So you are right, Joseph, that this is going to be, now that I'm thinking about it, all of this is going to be its own column. I'm running out of colors. Let's go. Is that purple different enough? Yes, it is. We're going to do another big section here, and then our final big section over here. Okay. Any questions about that visual breakdown? This helpful for people who have experience doing websites before? Is this a step that is helpful in planning out, or are you like, forget this, just get me into the code?
I think if I remember in my old class, it was always this type of method that'll help work code things better. That way you don't get lost in the coding process.
Yes. And
Yeah, it could
sometimes,
help you.
what was that?
And I say it could definitely help you map everything out so you don't get like convoluted and all like the steps you take in.
Yeah, this seems like a really basic step, right? And you're like, I probably don't really need to do this. But oftentimes you're going to get in your code and you're going to get one div wrong, and then you're going to be like, wait, I'm lost. How do I fix this, right? And so having that, either this or the Google outline, can really help you start mapping things in when you're debugging and figure out where your closing div is missing, or sometimes we'll get a div inside of another div accidentally. And that can help with that process. So I'm going to head to Google Docs. I'm going to pop open make a copy of the weather outline and rename that to week 2, day 4 news site outline. And I will share this link with you guys if you would like to follow along. We're going to clear all of this out. And just like our other site, we started with a container. And in that container, now we've got a couple rows. The other reason that I like doing this outline step is that sometimes it's really helpful to name things, because to the computer, it doesn't really matter, right? It's just a div. But to us, it can be really helpful to know what component we're working on. What section of the site are we working on? So I'm going to call row 1 my top nav, and I'm going to call row 2 my links nav. Could call that a header, you could call that a banner bar, or whatever you want to call it. Just naming it can make it helpful. And then row number 3 is going to be our main content. Okay, now let's go another layer deeper there. I'm going to have col number 1, and I think that is going to be a col 4, right? Because we said evenly divide them. And that's going to be my menu. Col 4, which is column number 2, is going to be my title. And then another col 4, which is going to be number 3, is for my sign-in button. Now I go a level deeper, and in my links nav, this is all going to be a col 12, and it has 4 spans in that. Because we want them to display inline, we're going to do spans, but we still want to be able to individually style them. We still want to put space between each one of them. And so because it's inline, we're going to make them spans. Then we come down to our main content, and I'm measuring this out, and I'm going, well, this looks like it's half the screen. And if this is half the screen, this must be a quarter of the screen, and this must be another quarter of the screen. So we say, all right, if this is 6, we have 6 left. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that must mean col 3 is going to be the latest section. I have a col 6 for the, let's call this the article section. And then I have a col 3 over here, which is going to be for my advertisements. I'm feeling pretty good about all of that. There's one last thing I need to break down, and that's my latest section over here. So in that latest, I have a section title. That's probably going to be maybe an H3. Then I also have to break down these rows. So I now have a row, and I have maybe a col 3 for the time, and a col 9 for the headline. And that gets repeated 3 times. Is that how you would do it? Do you have any questions of why we are doing it this way? All right. If that is the case, I'm going to go ahead and save this and make sure to actually save this time. Get this out of here. Looks like it's saved. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize my design. If you want to see the live version of what we are rebuilding, this is the link that I am posting in the chat. So you can go ahead and open that and get a little preview of what we are building, or you can use the mockup, or you can use what I am sharing on my screen. With all of that said, I'm going to head to VS Code. I'm going to go to File and Open Folder. I'm going to navigate into my code, my week 2, my day 3. I'm going to make a new folder in my day 3 called day 4. I'm going to go ahead and pop open my day 4 folder and create 2 files. One is going to be my index.html and the other will be my style.css. And then once you have both of those created, you can head to Zoom and copy the link for the live share. Remember, don't click on that link. It opens up in the browser or it will override your code. You don't want to do that. Right click on the link, copy, then go in VS Code, File, New Window. Go to your live share icon over on the left, click the join button, hit enter for that URL, and you should be into my live share. Oh, that's weird. Let me make sure that live share link is right because it booted me out of my folder. Sorry, wrong live share. If you're in my live share, go ahead and close it out. I don't know how it managed to do that. I gotta reshare that live share link. Apparently when you hit escape, it kicks you out of the folder that you have open. My bad. Hold on. Okay. Now the live share link is correct and you should be able to see the two files I've created. So if you had the live share open already, close that window, go file, new window, and then use the link I put in the Zoom chat. Sorry about that. I'm going to work on a solution over the weekend so that live share link doesn't have to change every single class. But for now, it is in the Zoom chat. Anyone need a minute? Anyone? We have our two files created that are totally blank right now, index.html and style.css. You should have two windows open.
Yeah, whenever I join, it keeps closing my other window that I had open.
You're going file, new window first. You basically have to make the window and then join the live share.
Yeah.
And it's still closing the other window.
Give me 1 second. I think I'm
Yeah.
gonna try it one more time. Okay. I think we're good.
Okay. It's a very specific order to get this in, and give yourself some credit because this is only week 1 of us doing this. By the time we get to week 23, you're going to be like, shut up, Max. I know how to do the live share. Okay. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's get our files created. We are going to use the Emmet shortcut that we used yesterday. So we're going to do an exclamation point enter, and that is going to auto drop in our HTML file first getting started. In our title tab, I am going to call this news website, news site. And I need to put in 2 additional things in my head. One is Bootstrap, the other is the link to my style sheet. So I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. I'm going to click on read the docs. I'm going to scroll down to number 2. This link tag right here, I'm going to triple click it to highlight it, copy it, come back over to beneath my title tag and paste that in. Again, getbootstrap.com, read the docs, scroll down to number 2, go to the link tag, triple click, copy, come back over to our index.html, go beneath our title tag and enter and paste. If it's easier to grab that from yesterday's code, that's also totally fine.
What was the first insert again? I'm sorry.
For the template,
Yes.
exclamation point, enter.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, we got one other thing we got to insert here. Beneath the bootstrap link, order does matter here, so it's got to be beneath the bootstrap link tag. We're going to put in our own link tag. We're going to say rel equals style sheet. And we're going to say href equals style.css. That is setting up our CSS file. I'm going to throw an h1 in here that says hello. I'm going to grab my style.css. I'm going to put it on the bottom half of my screen. You prefer a split screen, that's totally fine. However you want to lay out your files is good. H1, color red, go live. And if you have a red hello in Arial instead of Times New Roman, that means you have everything all set up and you are good to go. Setup's the most annoying part of the entire project. Give yourself some time.
Is there a way to get the bootstrap link to auto populate with Emmet?
Not that I know of, and the main reason behind that is it changes pretty frequently whenever Bootstrap releases a new version. Because the version number is part of the URL, and then this integrity thing is like a security encryption to make sure that you're not loading a fake version of Bootstrap. So I don't know that there's an easier auto insert for that. However, there is probably a VS Code extension, not necessarily Emmet, that will auto insert that for you. With that said, it's probably, even though, because we do new projects every couple days, it seems like something that you would do all of the time professionally. But when you're working on a larger professional website, you're going to do it once and then it will be set for the entire project. So it's something that we do frequently, but in the real professional world, you don't do as much as you think.
Gotcha.
The other thing that a lot of people do is they start with their own I'm blanking on what they call it, but it's basically a starter kit where they will have their boilerplate. That's what it's called. You'll make your own boilerplate, and then instead of making the day 4 folder from scratch, you just copy your template and paste it and rename it to day 4, and it's got everything set up inside of it. So that is setting up your own boilerplate is definitely something you can do. All right. Does anyone not have hello in red with Arial font? Lots of little steps there. I'm happy to repeat any of them. Asma.
Yeah, mine is black. I'm not sure what's going on.
Okay. Share screen. Um,
Do you see it?
I can. I can't see the problem though.
Sorry, if I may,
Oh,
is there supposed to be quotes around style CSS?
yeah. The href.
This one right here?
Yep. You need a quote, just like you have the quotes around style sheet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and never hesitate to chime in. If you can debug faster than I can, feel free to throw it out.
Perfect. I'm all set. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the assist there. All right, anyone else need help? Again, this is what you should be looking like. A red hello. All right. let's dive into our site. We can take out our H1, both the H1 in our body and the style.css. We're going to start with our outline, which all starts with a big container. However, instead of doing a class of just container, we're going to do a container fluid for the first time. Container fluid, again, is going to make our website span all the way across the page instead of being limited in the center, especially on bigger monitors. So I'm going to start with my container fluid, and the first thing I have is my top nav. So I'm going to start with coming inside my container fluid, and before I can get to div soup, I'm going to start adding in some notes. I'm going to say end of container fluid. Actually, I'm going to move that inside my div here.
What was the shortcut for notes again?
Be on a blank line and command /, and that will auto insert a comment for you.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to make my div class row, and every time I make a div, I'm going to add my comment and end of row. That way, it is easy to know what is this closing div for. This closing div is for my row, and really, I should say row number 1, top nav. Because now that I'm naming it, it's much easier to know, hey, this div isn't even a closing for just a row, it's a closing for a row that's specifically my top nav. Now I'm going to come back in here and do another div class equals call. And because these are 3 even columns, a 4, a 4, and a 4, I don't need to specify the 4, right? It will automatically space that out for me. And so I'm going to say menu. I'm going to say news site. And I'm going to say sign in. I save that. I come over to my live site. I've got my menu, my news site, and my sign in. Are they styled? No. Do I have my blue background on it? No. But I'm going to pause there. I want to get my entire site laid out. I want to get the content roughly in the right spot before I go in and style things component by component. So I'm just starting with my first row, getting my columns in place, and making sure that they are not wrapping down to the next line. If these are not going across your screen, chances are you have something wrong with your bootstrap or something wrong with your divs being nested. So I'm going to pause there, give you a chance to catch up. If you think you are done and it does not look like this in the browser, go ahead and raise your hand or come off mute. Happy to help. Everyone good? Anyone need a minute?
I'm all set.
All right. Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, mine's not.
Share screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are missing your div class row.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay.
And then just throw that closing div right after your comment.
Should we be commenting out every single div for our own, or just like the ones that seem like important as far as like stop bar, container fluid?
Yeah, the comments are up to you. So I normally only do it when it's going to be a bigger div, right? So you'll notice I didn't do closing comments on these closing divs because it's so obvious they go with these opening ones. I only do the comments to help you guys out because once your eye is trained enough, your opening and closing divs are much easier to find. So my suggestion is only do them on what you think will be a bigger div container. But that's totally up to you. You can decide to do no comments. You can decide to do a comment on every single closing div. That's all personal preference.
Okay.
Good question.
Is there any like difference between container fluid and just like container? Is there like any real difference between them?
Yeah, major difference. So container fluid is going to go all the way to the edge of the screen. A regular container, after it hits a certain screen size, is going to start putting spacing on either side of the screen. And that will be, I will show you once we start styling the nav bar, we'll take the fluid off the container fluid and we'll see how that affects the site layout. Okay, let's keep on going with our layout. I'm going back to my outline and I'm going, all right, I need another row for my links nav. But I'm looking at this and I'm like, all right, do I really need a whole row if the only thing in the row is going to be a col 12? I'm like, well, a col 12 is the full width. I don't think I even need a whole row there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this a little bit. I'm going to change this to a div. It's still going to be my links nav, but because it's just a div, I don't really need a column in there. I just need a div. That div by default takes up the full width of the screen. And if I can't use columns without a row, but if I'm not using columns, I don't really need a row in the first place. So that is a good thing to note here. Don't go grid crazy just because you're understanding the grid. If we don't need a row and columns, it's fine to use a regular div. So that's what we're going to do here. The first thing I need to do is say, where is this div going? It is inside my container, but it is after my row number 1. So I need to find where my row number 1 ends. That is this div here. But I do want it to be inside of my container, which is this closing div down here. So I'm going to put my cursor right after this closing div, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to make another div, and all I'm going to do is call this links nav.
Sorry, can you illustrate this on the photo? I mean,
Yeah.
on the actual website, please. Thank you.
Yeah, we are working on this row right here, which is this pink or this yellow right here. What we basically decided to do was make this yellow a div, so we don't need the green of the column.
That clears things up. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Now that we've got that in, we can take a look, and we've got links nav there. It's not centered. It doesn't have any pretty lines. There are no borders. That's all okay. All we're going to do is we're going to start with the layout. And the final piece of the layout that we have is this complicated main content down here. Now, this does need to be a row because we are using columns to divide it out. So I'm going to go back to my code, and I'm going to say, all right, still within my container fluid, I'm going to make a div. It's got to be a row because we identified that there are 3 columns inside of it. I'm going to throw the end of main content row number 3 right here. And then inside of that row, I need to break that up into a column with a 3, a 6, and a 3. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to say div class equals col3, and I will say latest, and I'll throw a comment in here, end of latest call. Now here's a little shortcut for you. If you're sick of typing out div class equals, we're going to use an Emmet shortcut here. If you type in period col-6, you can hit enter, and shabam, it will put in the div class equals for you. So again, that's on a new line, period, the class name that you want, enter, and it will automatically put that div in there for you. You will see that I don't use Emmet frequently. People who make HTML sites day in and day out use it religiously, right? They use it to very quickly put in all of those different classes. So Emmet's a really powerful keyboard shortcut system specifically for HTML. So I am going to say in there, that is my article section. And I'm going to say end of article call. And the last one I'm going to create is my col3. And that is going to be for my ads. And I will say end of ads call. Go ahead and save that. I'm going to head to my news site, and I have my latest, my article, and my ads. Man, is it not pretty? But we've just accomplished all of our layout. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to start a poll so everyone's got a chance to catch up. If you think you are done and it is still not working, feel free to raise your hand and ask for help. But going to give everyone an opportunity to catch up to this layout. Oh, who voted for never vote for me? I can't see who it is now, but I can after I end the poll.
That was me. I think I jumped ahead maybe because I remember some stuff. So my layout's not broken. I just was trying to fix what I was doing.
Okay.
But I'm good though.
Zoom's annoying. I can't see who voted for every option, but when I end the poll, it will let me download the poll results.
Yep. Yes, sir. And today I'm taking a lot of notes because yesterday I had to rewatch the video the class session a couple of times, so I'm taking notes today. I'm trying to keep up, but I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what's going on for sure.
And you know that there is absolutely no shame in that. Some of our best students have learned that they learn better from absorbing it all the first time and then going through their notes, after class and working through the code. That is totally fine. There's a reason we have that option on here, because some people learn better from absorbing it the first time and other people learn better by doing it hands-on. That's totally fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And you think as it goes, it's going to get harder and more people are going to take notes. That's not always the case. Some people will always learn better hands-on. And while the content continues to get harder, you'll also have the base of all of that knowledge you already have to build on. Still a couple people working, so we'll give you a couple more minutes, and then we will move on.
I think I did mine wrong.
Okay, share your screen. All right. So the first thing I notice is your indentation is off. And so now we've got a problem here because it's really hard to follow where things are nested inside of. So if I scroll up here, we've got our row, we've got 3 columns inside of it. It's all in a container fluid. This div ends this div, and we're like, great, we're good to go. Now we come down here, and this div is closing out the container. That's not right. We want all of our content of the entire page to be inside the container. So I'm going to take that closing div, throw it all the way down here because that is actually the end of the container fluid. And then I got to fix my indentation. So now we go, all right, this div is the end of the row 1 top nav. So we put those comments inside. The comment is the last thing that goes inside that div. Now we come down to our links nav, and that gets indented. Oops, that should get indented. Because this links nav is at the same level of this row out here. Now we come in another layer deeper, and this row lines up with this links nav and this row up here. Now, the word latest, we got to pause there. Where is that meant to be? So do you have the Google outline open? Perfect, thank you. Take that back over. Here we go, all right, we've got row number 3. This is our row number 3. Now we have a col 3 inside of that that says latest. Do we have a col 3 here that says latest? No, we don't. So we got to create that. So we're going to say class equals col 3. And we're going to put the word latest inside of it. And then move our comment also inside that col. Now this div is closing out the row. We're like, we're not done with the row. What else do we have to put inside this row? We have to put in a col 6 for the article and a col 3 for the advertisements. So we are going to take out this div and line this col 6 up because this col 6 is at the same parent level of the 3 up here. Now we say end of article, end of ads. Ads comes over. So that's all indented right. And now it's super easy to say this div lines up with this row. So we're going to close that out and say this is the end of main content row. We have our closing div, which actually lines up with the end of the container all the way up here. And now when I save, take a look in your browser. Does that fix your layout issues? Yes, it does, and you're good to go. You're on mute if you're talking to us.
So my question is, how you was able to shift like the div class vote that whole block into like the right? How did you
Yeah, if you just highlight all 3 lines of it, you can hit the tab key and it will tab all 3 lines over at the same time.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Max.
Of course. Any other questions? Anyone not have their code working?
Can you just share how it looks like on Google?
Yeah. It should look like this.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a quick break for attendance. The secret word tonight is news, N-E-W-S. Over to Canvas, get attendance in, and then we will move on to actually loading up this site, making it look all nice and pretty.
Max, before we get there, this is
Yeah.
not a code related question. I dragged and dropped my live share button on accident. trying to load up what you was doing. And it's gone. Like the live share button is gone.
If you right click down where it used to be, hopefully there is a menu that appears with the check marks and you
Oh,
can turn it back on.
not mine. Like for me to go live, it's like for yours, like that to get the
Over
live share
here?
that you're yeah, it's gone. I don't know where it went. I
Right
don't know
click
what I
over
did.
there and see if that lets you bring it back.
I don't see nothing. I don't see anything. It's gone. I don't know where I dragged and dropped it to.
So when you right click, you just have like extensions and then it goes right down to GitHub or accounts.
I'm gonna share my screen with you so you can
Okay,
see
you might
what
just
I
have to
did.
you might just have to reinstall the extension.
I did that. It's installed. I don't I'm gonna just show you.
Yeah, go for it.
So I was trying to get to something and I dragged and dropped it. So I tried to reinstall it. It is installed though, but I don't know where it went.
Okay. If we go ahead and do that.
Hold on. Okay, you should be good.
Okay. Yep. So, all right, let's try uninstall, reload. Reinstall. Quit and reopen. Oh, that's weird. Why is your spotlight not finding it? Can you reopen that for me?
Yeah.
And then, well, it's like here. Why is your icon not over there? It's clearly installed.
Yeah, I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know you could move a button around.
There's one other thing I can check, and if not, I'm gonna have to get back to you.
As long as I could use it, it's not a big deal. We can figure it out later.
I feel like this happened to someone else, and it was the live share button in the bottom that disappeared. And we figured out that if you just right click over here, it brings it back. But that's not. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get
We'll
back to you
circle
on
back.
that.
We'll circle back to it.
Sorry, I don't know what to tell you on that one.
That's how we'll figure it out. It's cool.
All right, let's get our top bar styled, and then we will head on break, or maybe our top two bars. Let's see how far we can get. So I'm looking at where we're headed. And I've got this nice blue background, and I've got my text centered and right aligned. So that's what I want to shoot for, plus a little, maybe a little padding on the top and bottom. So let's start with the text, because that's probably the easiest. In addition to my call on my news site, I can just say text center. And then on my sign in, I can add in a text end, and all of a sudden that pushes the text to the right spot. Now, I also want to work on this entire row. I don't want blue to be on each individual column, because if I do, I may end up with some weird gaps between them, right? So I'm thinking about the entire bar I want to turn blue, that entire top row. So that's why I'm not putting a class on each one of these. Instead, I'm going to add an ID onto my row of, call it top nav. And then I can come in, and because it's an ID, I'm going to say # top nav, and I'm going to put a background color on that of dark blue. I save, and I'm like, yee. Well, that is dark blue. Where did all my text go? Well, my text is still there, and I can highlight it. The problem is that text is black. And so I'm going to go back to my design, and I go, oh, the text on that is white. I can fix that. So I'm going to say, hey, my color of that text should be white. And just like that, I have it fixed. And the last thing is, if I look, I've got this nice breathing room up and below. But I need to be careful there because I think, oh, I'm moving that element around, but I also want it to make the background area bigger. Margin does not impact the background area. Padding does. So what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of padding onto that site, onto that top bar, and I only want it on the top and the bottom because the left and the right sides, I want to align all the way. So I'm going to add in my padding top of 15 pixels and my padding bottom also of 15 pixels. And just like that, I have my top bar styled out. Amazing what 4 lines of CSS can do, huh? And you may be saying, Max, how do you know it's 15 pixels? I would have done 20 or I would have done 10. Yeah, that's normal, right? Play around with it, throw a number in, see what you think. If you think that looks better, roll with it. Sometimes, depending on how pixel perfect we're going for our design, sometimes the designer will actually have that all measured out for you. And you can use a tool like Figma to measure how tall their rectangle is and then use those measurements yourself. Sometimes it's just a rough estimate and you're just working off a wireframe and you got to play around with those values and see what works best for you. So that's totally one of those. It depends on the situation. It depends how strict of a designer you're working with. And it just depends on what you think looks good. Everyone good? Anyone not have their top nav bar looking like this?
So we only use top pattern to like adjust like the top of the bar.
Yeah, so we just applied the padding to the above the text and below the text. If we used margin instead, look what happens. It moves the entire bar down, but it doesn't fill in that background behind it because margin doesn't affect background, but padding does. So padding, think of it as blowing up the div, making the div bigger, compared to margin, which is pushing the entire div down. Or left or right or wherever. Okay, now, before we move on here, don't follow me on this one, let's see the importance of our container fluid. Right now, if I take this out, you can see my nav bar is going all the way across the screen. Well, if I go for a regular container and bring it out, all of a sudden I got those white gaps on the side of the screen. And you're like, well, that looks funny. Why would I ever want to do that? Well, if we go to a site like NewYorkTimes.com, you'll see the New York Times doesn't actually go all the way across the screen because it makes that text easier to read. When I shrink that down, however, you can see it does take the full width of the screen. It just depends on how wide of a screen that I'm working with. For this design, I actually want it to go the full width of the screen because we have 3 separate columns that we're working with. Because I've got a design that is laying things out and taking advantage of everything, I do want it to go to that full width of the screen. So I use my container fluid instead of my regular container, and that's what lets me see everything up to the edge. Make sense? it is possible to have multiple containers on a page. It's not recommended, but if you really wanted to, if you wanted to have your nav bar take up the full width of the page, but then have your page content constrained into a regular container, a non-fluid container, you could do that. You could put your nav bar and your top nav in a container fluid, and then put your main page section in a regular container. That would constrain it all in. That's totally fine to do. But that's something that normally we only want to have one container on the entire page, unless we're specifically going for that design of a full width nav bar and then having content constraint. Okay, with all of that said, let's get a visual touch base and an outline touch base. The next thing that we're doing is this links bar down at the bottom. And if I look at my outline, we said, all right, that's going to be a div. I don't need to use columns inside of that because we're going to use spans instead. And those 4 spans are for top stories, news, sports, and life. So that's where we're going to start. Come over to my links nav. I'm going to take out that placeholder text, and I'm going to say, oops, I'm going to make inside that div a span for top stories, a span for news, a span for sports, and a span for life. I save, I take a look at what that looks like, and I've got all 4 of them there. And the way that I like to work on my CSS, the order doesn't really matter, but I like to look at it as what is going to get me the closest step to the final design. Because we can always get into little details at the end easier than if we get to the details at the beginning. So I'm going to look at my design here, and I'm going to go, all right, what's the biggest difference between this and this? Well, it's not centered, right? So let's start there. I'm going to go up to my div that I have no classes on yet, and I'm going to say, I want all of that text to be centered. I can't do it on these individual spans. I'm not centering the spans themselves. I'm going up to the parent, and I'm telling the parent, center all 4 things that are inside this. And now we have them all centered. So the next thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to say, all right, what's the biggest difference between this and this? Well, what screams out to me is there's nice spacing between these. So that's what we're going to target. We are going to say, hey, inside of my, whoa, that's just a div. We haven't put anything on that. So I need to identify that, and I call that in my outline links nav. So we'll call that links nav here. And I want to be careful here because what I really want to do is add margin to that span. But I don't really want to add a class to each one of those spans, right? That could get a little repetitive. If only there was a way in our CSS to say, hey, target the spans only if they're inside of the links nav. In fact, there is a way to do that. I can say, hey, in my links nav, go target the spans. So in our CSS selector, we don't have to use just a class, just an element, or just an ID. We can actually add multiple conditions to our selector there. This is saying only apply to spans if they're in an ID called links nav. Inside of that, I can add some margin to the left of 10 pixels and some margin to the right of 10 pixels. And just like that, I now have a little bit of breathing room between my links. I'm going to pause there because we went through a lot there. I added an ID of links nav. I added a class of text center. Why don't I need to define this class of text center? Because that's coming from Bootstrap. So Bootstrap wrote that CSS for me. I don't need to worry about it. Then I have my 4 spans, but because I don't want to add a class to each individual one, I'm instead able to write a joint selector, or a selector that has multiple conditions here, by just separating them with a space and saying, hey, go target my links nav, and then target the spans inside of that links nav. Add a little margin to the left and right of them, and that is what has them all spaced out for me.
So is it also possible to have like link nav? Let's say you have like the anchor tag. Is it possible to just, target just the anchor tag?
It sure is. Yep.
Quick question about how you just targeted something within another thing in
Mhm.
CSS. Does that second object always have to be a element, or can you target all the classes within an ID?
All the
Or vice
classes, all
versa.
the IDs. Yeah, you can, anything that you can do in the first selector, you can do in the second selector, basically.
Okay.
And sometimes you get 9 levels deep. And so, you can say, all right, I'm targeting in the body, in the container, in the links bar, in the span. This is what I want. Or you could, target any level of specificity that you wanted.
Not that it probably particularly matters for this, but is there like a compute tax on doing it one way over the other, like targeting, like setting an ID to something versus going 9 levels deep?
Yeah, it's usually recommended that you don't go more than 6 levels deep on a selector tag. So it is much less taxing to select an ID or a class than it is to do several levels deep. But in terms of browser efficiency, you don't see any impact on rendering time until you get about 6 levels deep of specificity.
Alrighty.
And then
That-
at that point, you're probably making it even harder on yourself. Like
Yes.
if if you don't go the route of choosing an ID.
We're going to learn something called SAS, and the file extension is SCSS. What you may be tempted to do is say something like, again, don't follow me here, say something like, hey, in my links nav, target the span, and then inside that span, add some margin, right? And you will see, if I take this out in my CSS, why did that just work? This is normally invalid CSS. And so we use something called SAS for that. That actually allows us to write CSS in that way and write multiple selectors nested in those curly braces. I'm going to go do some research as to why that is working. That may be a new CSS feature. But in general, in older CSS, this was not valid. And so we would have to write our selectors, all spaced out. And then we would use something like SAS that would allow us to use the syntax and basically backwards compile it so that it would work in all browsers. I'm now curious.
I was gonna say that's the power of coding. You code something, suddenly it works, and you're just questioning why.
I am really questioning. Okay, well, I'll have an answer for you after break as to why that's working. But anyway, this is the safer way of writing it until we get into SAS, and then SAS will support a syntax like that. All right, we got 5 minutes left before break. Let's finish this out with the styling of our top nav, and then we will call it a day. All right, so I'm going to head back to my finished version. And what do I notice? I notice that there is this nice bold line under sports. That's meant to show you that no, I don't actually like sports, that it is the active section, right? So if we click on that, it would like scroll it into view. So that we are going to do with an active link. So because we'll only have one active link at a time, we can handle that with an ID. So we'll say ID active link. We'll come down here and target our active link. And there are a couple things that we want to do on that. We want to make the active link bold. So we'll use font weight of bold. And then we also need to get that bottom line working. And so we can achieve that by saying, hey, we're going to put a border only on the bottom. And that border is going to be 5 pixels tall. It's going to be solid, and it's going to be orange. And I save that, I take a look, and I get my bottom bar there. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of what I wanted, but I'm still missing something. What is it about this design? What it is that vertical spacing. So what I'm going to do is go back and target my links nav, not the span inside of it, just the entire bar. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, throw some padding on the top of 10px and some padding on the bottom of 10px, because I want the whole bar to grow. So I take a look at that and I'm like, I guess that's better. Kind of hard to tell, right? Well, what is it about this final design that makes that bar look like it's got that height? This tiny little border line that's running all the way across is what is giving your eye the visual separation between the links bar and the rest of the page. So we can achieve that of going back to our links nav and saying, hey, throw some border on the bottom of 1px solid. And if we do black, look at what happens here. It looks like it's too dark, right? It looks like we're really saying, no, this is a separate part of the site. So we can lighten that up a little bit by just going to gray. And now all of a sudden, visually, we're going, yeah, that is a nice separation, right? We can see what's meant to be the top and what's meant to be the bottom, but we're not drawing a line in the sand and going, no, these are two separate parts of the site. The only other problem that we have now that we've put that border in there is that this bottom bar, that border, is nicely anchored on the bottom, right? It's giving that room so that we know it's associated with the sports link, but it isn't necessarily right up against it. How do we fix that? Well, right now, the problem is that border is too high. What do we know about border versus margin? Margin is going to push other elements away, but it's not going to affect the border or the background of that element. So what we want to use instead is the padding. So I'm going to go back into wherever I have that orange. That orange is applied to active link, and I'm going to put some padding on the bottom of 8 pixels. And if I spell padding right, my orange bar jumps down to the bottom exactly where I want it, and we are officially good to go. Angel, I can show a hover effect. There's the ability to add what we call a pseudo selector. And I showed Nth Child yesterday at the end of class and couldn't remember what this was called. It is called a pseudo selector, PSUEDO. A pseudo selector is a way to basically say, only apply this if this condition is true. And so pseudo selectors are most often used for hover effects. They can also be used for things like only select the 5th item in the div or something like that. In order to get that to work, we can say, hey, apply this styling to active link, but also apply this styling to a links nav span where you are hovering over it. So this is doubling up here. We're using a comma to say apply this styling to 2 things, and then we're using this colon hover to say only apply it to the span if you are actively hovering over it. So now when we come over here and hover over any of these items, you see we get that styling applied into it. And the last kind of cool thing here is right now we just have a cursor, a text selection, right? But hypothetically, this would be a link. We want to tell the user, hey, you can click on this thing. So we can achieve that by saying cursor is supposed to be a pointer. And when we save that and come over here and hover over it, you'll notice our mouse changes to the hand.
Wait, so why are we cutting just for the border bottom, why we couldn't just increase or decrease it to make the orange bar like lower at the bottom instead of using like the padding bottom?
So I don't want the bar to be that tall, right? We could play around with it and say, hey, make it 15. Now it's touching the bottom bar, but I'm like, that doesn't look right. Right? It's touching, but it's not quite right. That white space, even though it's only 8 pixels, is the difference between you're like, what's going on there? Why is there an orange rectangle under the word sports compared to, oh, it looks like sports is kind of underlined as part of the links design.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So why is it that targeting the ID active link and then links nav, and then when you're spanning, why is that working for all of the elements within that div, or all the spans within that div, even though, is it because links nav is in their second?
You're saying, why does this apply to all of the spans?
Yeah, why is it a spanning applying to all of them, even though active link is only assigned to the span sports?
So this section will apply to all of the spans, no matter what class is on them. This comma right here is saying apply it to this only to active link, but also apply it to links nav span if it is being hovered over.
Oh, I see. Okay. So they're two separate. Okay. I thought they were going within each other.
No, so this is the equivalent of doing
Right. Two separate things.
that.
I see.
So in order to save us from having to do that 2 separate times, native CSS will let us just comma separate it and say apply it to this selector and also this other selector.
I see.
All right.
We're so used to seeing and, but it's made simpler by just using a comma. So that was
You
a
got it.
valid question.
Yes. All right. Go on break. Be back at 7:30, and we will continue on making the rest of the site. And if anyone needs help, we'll start after break with debugging. May not feel like it, may feel like it's amazing that it takes 2 hours for us to get to this point, but it's amazing how quickly a site can come together, especially when we've got the design thought out. We've gone through all of the outlining, we've got an idea of where we're headed. With all of that said, did anyone have trouble before the break getting their site to look like this? Anyone need help? Okie doke. Then we are going to continue on here. We've got our top 2 divs working. Now we dive into kind of the more complex part, right? Believe it or not, this is all one giant row. Remember, we can very easily see columns going across, but when we're working with rows, sometimes we think about them of all being equal height. And just like in a spreadsheet, how we can make rows taller or shorter, we can also do that in our HTML. The kind of cool part is that it will automatically keep on expanding that row until we get to the height that we need. So let's go back to our outline. We're working with this latest section here, right? And so we've got a lot of sub things that we got to work with that we want to be careful on that we're putting in our comments, and we're keeping track of our opening divs and our closing divs. The one thing to look out for is if our article or ads disappears, chances are they're actually hanging out underneath latest, and that is a sign that we've done something wrong in our closing divs. So we want to be really careful here. If we notice article or ads disappears, it isn't, oh, I'll fix that later. It's, all right, let me figure out where my closing divs got off, because more divs make it harder to detangle them as we go. Okay. So we've got a col 3 for the latest, and it says H3 section title. So let's start with that one. I'm going to come into, I got to figure out where my cursor is going first. We've got the word latest there. We're inside a col 3. And again, the col 3 is right here. So we know where we're at on our outline. So I'm going to make the word latest an H3 headline. Move the word latest inside of it. And we've got the word latest showing up, and I'm like, all right, that's looking like the final version. Now I've got to deal with these rows. And we can tell that these are rules because this one's spanning into 2 different sections, but notice all of these times are staying aligned. So we always want to think about rows first and columns second, not think about this as one big column and this is one other column, because we want them to align going across, not necessarily just a line going down. So rows first, we're thinking 6 minutes and headline 1. We're not thinking column first, which is 6 minutes, 2 hours, and 3 days. So I'm going to start with our first row. And what do we have? We've got a row with the time as a col 3 and the headline as a col 9. So let's work with that. I'm going to come down under my latest, and we can't use a column directly inside another column. We always need a row to reset the 12. So we aren't talking about subdividing this col 3 into 3 divided by however many spots we're going for. When we put that row in, we reset our 12. We've got another 12 available to us. The difference is the 12 is only going to take up the area inside of that row. So I'm going to do my div class row. And I'm going to do end of one latest headline row. Then inside of that, I'm going to do my class col 3. And that is going to get the time, like 6 minutes ago. And then we're going to do another div class col 9. And that is going to get a headline, which we'll use an H4 for. And it says my first headline. I save that, I come over here, and that's looking kind of the way that I want it to. I am then able to copy this, but I want to be really careful. I'm copying the entire row. So I'm going to click on that and make sure that this is my closing div for the row. It is, so I'm going to highlight that whole thing, come down after this div, but before this closing div, again, I need to be inside the end of the latest column, and I'm going to paste it 2 times. This is where if you don't paste in the right spot or if you don't have the right thing selected, things go haywire really quickly. So take your time here. Make sure that your opening div, your closing div are selected. Make sure you're pasting in the right spot. I'm going to clean this up with a couple different headlines. I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here, and now I should have my 3 headlines showing up as I want.
A quick clarifying question. So every single time you make an additional column, well, technically row, but also considering it within the column scope, you're essentially resetting the 12 partitions. Okay, because I was thinking that, since we had initially spanned it for 3, would do 1 and 2, but that's not necessarily how. Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
That is, yeah, let me try and do that visually. That's a really good question that I probably did not articulate well. So when we made our 3rd row here, right? We've got 1 row, we've got 2 rows, and then this is our 3rd row right here. This entire thing is split across 12. We then split this up into a 3, a 6, and a 3. We're visually dividing out the screen 3, 6, and 3. However, we came in here and we made another row right here. Because we made that row, this is now split again into 12. So we used a 3 right here and a 9. Because we put a row in, because we didn't try and do a column inside of a column, that row reset our 12 available column spaces and subdivided them out. We did not make this a 1 and a 2 because it is not based off of the 3 down here. It is based off of another 12 because we made the row. That makes sense? Safi may have asked the question in a better way than the way I just explained it, and that's totally fine if you got what she was asking and not what I was explaining.
Yeah, just to recap, it's just that every single time, just think of it as a resetting of the 12 partitions as opposed to like a section of the original larger 12 partition of the container.
You got it.
Would the HTML just not recognize that there's a column inside of another column without a row setting in there? Would it just like recognize it? It would think it was it would look back to the parent row.
It would do that. So it just doesn't treat the column properly because it's like, whoa, is this col 3 in relation to the row all the way up here? But basically the way Flexbox works is it needs the parent in order to know how big the columns are all the way across. So if you don't have that row in there, it can't figure out what the total width is that it's supposed to divide by 12, and it just breaks. It's like, how do I know what 12 across is if I don't know how big the total width is?
Right.
And so go ahead.
I see. So a column can never be a parent.
Well, technically, this col 3 is the parent of this row. But you can never use a column directly in another column as the parent without the row to reset it in between.
Can you use columns without rows at all? Like you just had like just a blank thing, you just set 3 separate okay, it needs the row to because it's dividing, I see. All right.
Yes. And if you can, well, let's find out.
I think it's helping me to think about if I'm like thinking about an inspecting element and reading what it's
Yeah.
like dividing the actual screen space up versus
That's
within
exactly
there.
what
That
it's
makes
doing.
more sense.
Yep. Yeah, I just threw in 2 col 3s here without a row, and it just stacked them right on top of each other.
Right.
So that
Okay.
row is required, yeah. You'll also run into some weirdness if you use a row and don't use a column in between. You'll notice that the things on the page don't line up right. What the row basically is doing is adding some margin on the side, and then the columns take that margin back out when they're figuring out their spacing. So if you ever use a row and forget to put it in a column, you can get into some weird alignment issues where you're like, why is this not this one section wider than my entire page or slightly smaller than my entire page? It's because rows and columns have a symbiotic relationship. One can't exist without the other. So you definitely don't want to put content in a row without a column, and you don't want to use a column without a row.
And
Okay.
then just a specific, oh,
No,
if
go
I
ahead,
can
go ahead.
ask. Okay, I believe it's line 33. I know that this 6M is essentially just text there,
Yep.
but if we're more used to just putting it to a P tag, is that okay? Just dropping it down one, or is that, do you?
Yeah, that would be fine. Because P tags are block elements. You wouldn't want to put it in like a span tag there because span
Mhm.
tags are inline elements.
Right.
But if you did it as a P, that shouldn't change anything. That should work the same. Yeah.
Oh, no. So I just mean leaving it as a div, but just the 6M itself, putting it into a P
Oh,
tag.
putting this into a paragraph?
Yeah,
The only
yeah.
downside to doing that is it will add a little bit of margin on the bottom of it.
Oh,
In
okay.
this case, it isn't a problem, but by default, P elements have margin on the bottom. So if you use multiples, they'll kind of stack and have space between them. But that's totally fine to use. Either is fine.
No, but I can see how it could like mess up the configuration of the screen, especially if you have multiple. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Fair
in
enough.
this case, it's not impacting anything because these headlines are so tall. But if you had two things right next to each other, that could impact it. And of course, you can
Okay.
always use CSS to remove that default margin. But you know,
Yeah,
it's totally
makes
fine to
sense.
do that. Yep. Okay, we ready for our first image? Did anyone have problems here? Does anyone not have the word article still showing in the right spot? Or not showing in the right spot?
I have everything set up. It just my first headline is a bit off from the rest.
Okay, you want to share your screen? Let me see it in the browser.
Okay.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's doing a
Do you
thing.
have all right, take me back to your code and let me request remote. What's probably the problem here is you may have an extra space hanging out here. I'm gonna just take that out. No? Recall 9. This closes this. And then you notice what we don't have here, end latest headline.
Mm-hmm.
You are missing a closing div.
Oh, okay.
Now we've got another problem. What happened?
Everything moved down.
So this closing div is closing off this row, and then you've got another div here that's closing out the column, and then you've got a div here that's closing out the entire mega row that's supposed to hang everything in there. So you've got an extra one hanging out here, and that brings everything up into the right spot.
So having an extra one would really like mess things up a bit.
Because putting that extra one there says, hey, I'm done with this row up here. There are no other columns coming in this row. And the other two columns that are supposed to be in that row were article and ads. So that's when that was a simple case of you copied all of this. And then when you pasted it right in here instead of right in down here.
Mm,
And that's what pushed that closing div all the way down and caused the problems.
okay.
And so that's a case of you have to make it worse to get the headlines lining up in order to make it better for the other content to line up as well.
Okay. Appreciate it, Max.
Of course. Any other questions? All right, we're going to dive into our very first image, and we're going to do the image the right way this time. It's very it's usually a bad idea to link to an image on someone else's website. And that's what we kind of played around with for the first time we used an image tag. We went to Unsplash and we copied the image URL and we put that in our own site. The problem is, what happens if Unsplash goes down? What happens if Unsplash deletes that image? What happens if, you know, we can't access that website anymore, or something as simple as they change the file name and now all of a sudden that's broken on our website as well? So usually not a good idea, not to mention opening all kinds of copyright issues of whether or not we're allowed to use that image or link to that image on their website. So 99% of the time when we're using an image, we want to host it ourselves. We want to have a copy of that image. So in order to do that, we're going to go to unsplash.com. If you have any other royalty-free websites that you like to use, Pixabay is a really popular one. We just like to do royalty-free here, mainly because our videos get posted on YouTube, but also whenever you're building a website for someone, whether it's icons, fonts, images, or videos, or sound effects, you always want to make sure that you have the copyright license to use that, whether you are buying that license or whether you are using a royalty-free website like Unsplash. Unsplash was purchased by Getty Images. So there are now some images on Unsplash that are not totally free. So you can see this plus up here. That means that the download is locked. That means that you have to pay for that image or pay for a premium subscription to Unsplash. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to just pick any random horizontal image. A vertical image would work as well, but the space that we kind of have designed for this is better for a landscape image. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click this download button. Like I said, you can pick any image you want as long as it doesn't have a plus or a lock on the download button. Grab that. I'm going to close my Unsplashed. I'm going to head back over to my VS Code, pop open my File Explorer if it's closed. I'm going to go down to my Downloads folder, and I'm going to drag and drop my image into my Day 4 folder. If you do have multiple folders open, make sure you are getting it in the Day 4 folder. If it is in Day 3, if it is in Week 2, it will not work. So I'm going to, again, I hit the download button on Unsplash. I open up my VS Code. I go to my downloads in my dock. I grab that and drag it into my File Explorer over here. If you don't have downloads in your dock, you can go to Finder and Downloads and then drag it in that way as well. I am then going to rename that image to pretty.jpg. I can close that image if I have it open as a tab, and now I get to work with it inside of my code. So I'm going to find where am I trying to put that image. That image is going to go into my col 6. So I'm going to take out the word article. I'm going to type in IMG, and then I'm going to type in SRC, short for source, equals, that automatically put in my quotes, and I'm going to say pretty.jpg. That file extension has to match. So don't rename the file extension. If it was JPEG downloaded, use the JPEG. If it was a PNG that downloaded, use the PNG. Whatever it is, that file extension has to be the same as the original photo. I'm then going to put a slash and a self-closing tag at the end of it. Save. And if you did everything right, you should have a giant photo in your web browser. I would be shocked if at least one of you didn't need help here. So if you did not get an image showing up and you've got it in the Day 4 folder and the file name matches in the source, raise your hand. Let me know if you need help. Everyone good? Okay. So I've got this in here. Now I've got a quite literally a big problem, right? It's huge. Well, I can come in here and I can say at the bottom of my CSS, don't follow me on this quite yet. Hey, my image should be a max width of 100%. And that does shrink it down for me. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's what I want, right? I want it to not get as big as the original source file. I want it to only be as big as 100% of what? 100% of this column 6 that it's in. But that is kind of bold because I may want some images not to be 100%. I may want them to only be 50%. I may want to apply some other styling to them. So we don't want to apply this IMG, this width 100% to every single image on my website. But I don't want to have to do that every single time. Well, just like we have a container fluid, what do we mean by fluid on a container? It means that it is spilling out to fill up the amount of space that we have, right? Just like when we pour water into a glass, it is only going to become the width of the glass. It's not going to become the width of my entire room. Well, we can do that just like we can do that on a container fluid. We can accomplish that with a image fluid, IMG-FLUID. That is going to come from Bootstrap. Bootstrap said we get container fluid. Why not apply fluids to an image as well? So image fluid is just going to shrink it in and make it appear the right size that I want it to. So again, that's just a class image fluid that I add onto my image, and that should size it up to my columns perfectly. Okay, anyone have questions? Everyone have tiny images?
I have a question. What's controlling the height of it? Because I get the fluid is regarding the width, but what's controlling the height?
Yeah, the height's based off of the original file ratio. So it will, based off of whatever percent it's shrinking down the width, it will also shrink the height down a corresponding amount.
Depending on the proportions of the original image. It sounds great. Okay.
You got it. Yeah. Yeah, based off the aspect ratio or height versus width or however you want to think about the ratio. Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and get our headlines in here. So I'm going to go back to my original. I've got a headline in here, some text underneath it, the author, and some bullet points. So I'm going to put this off to the side if I can, so I can reference it as I'm coding it. Where do I want that to go? I want that to go underneath my image, but still in my column 6. So I'm going to come underneath my image. I'm going to make that an H4, and I'm going to say some breaking news. I'm coming outside of my H4 because I've got some tagline text going on there. So I'm going to put a P tag in that says some info about the breaking headline. I've got another section here that's meant to be the author and then how recently it was published. So I'm going to put that in yet another P tag. And then finally, I've got some bullet points about that article. So I got to think, is this an ordered list or an unordered list? An ordered list is going to be 1, 2, 3. An unordered list is going to give me bullet points. So I want the bullet points. So I'm going to make a UL. And then inside of them, I'm going to say some bullets to show up here. Go ahead and save that. And this is what it should look like. Now, 4 days ago, did you think that you'd be writing HTML that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 levels deep? You probably would look at this and go, oh, what any of this means. This is a foreign language. But look at what you're creating. You've got this entire news site almost done in a single 3-hour coding session. HTML is one of those things where it's like, yeah, it looks intimidating till you understand the basics, right? Once you get that syntax down, once you understand content goes in the middle, attributes go inside the tag, the CSS does the styling, we lean on Bootstrap for the grid alignment, and all of a sudden, you can build an entire news website with just those basic concepts. All right, anyone need a minute on this? Okay. One thing that I notice is this is not quite looking like this. We've got some weird spacing going on, and we've got this lingering emptiness, right? This white section, it looks a little too white. There's something not breaking it up, right? Let's tackle these lines first. So the first thing I notice is, okay, well, that looks like it's a border, right? It's a border between the left column and the center column. So if I go up and I say, all right, I'm going to add an ID, that's my breaking col, breaking as in breaking news column. And then I come down and I add my ID for the breaking col. I can add a border of 1px solid black. And I want that border to be on the left and on the right of my breaking col. So I come back over here, I take a look. There are my columns, and I'm like, well, that certainly looks a lot better, but I've got a problem. I want this column, this border, to go all the way down to the bottom of the page. So I'm like, all right. I know Max said not to usually use height, but what happens if we say height 100%? Nothing. What is it 100% of? It's 100% of the content that is on the screen. And I'm like, well, no, I want it to be 100% of what? I want it to be 100% of the viewport's height. What's the viewport? Basically the window, right? The sizes of the window, that's what I want it to be. Well, that's not 100% VH. That is what we do 100% viewport height. So when I say 100% VH, that again is 100% of the viewport height. So now I come over here and I'm like, yeah, my lines are there. Great. And I scroll down and I'm like, okay, a little too far. Why do I have a scroll bar here? Does anyone know why I'm getting a scroll if I said 100% VH?
It's so that if there's like more content being added, I guess, to the bottom of the HTML, you can keep scrolling and the border will still cover that section.
Not quite. The problem is 100% VH is from here all the way down to here. But what did I just say? I'm applying the 100% VH to. I'm only applying it to the breaking col. That means the breaking col starts here and is going to be 100%. And that's where this extra space is coming from. It's coming because the top bar is also taking up space. So we've got to come up with a solution to say, I want my main content section to be based off of 100% of the viewport height minus the section that the two top bars are taking up. So this gets a little complicated. This is definitely getting into more advanced CSS. So if your eyes are glossing over here and you're like, I don't get this, leave height alone, right? Height is one of those things that 95% of the time, the browser is going to calculate better than you can. However, this is a situation where we want to tell the computer, we want this main section to be 100% minus however tall this section is up here. So I am going to tell the computer, hey, the height of this window is going to be calculated. How is it going to be calculated? It's going to be 100% of the viewport height minus whatever the height is of this top bar. How do I figure that out? Well, I can go into inspect here, make sure that I'm on my top nav section, scroll all the way down to the bottom right here. By the way, if your inspect is on the right-hand side, if it looks like this, you can use the bottom half of it down here to see everything that I'm seeing. I personally don't like it anchored on the right. I like it anchored on the bottom. I think it gives me more room to read the code. So I click on the top 3 dots here, throw it down at the bottom. I prefer that. Whatever works for you is totally fine. Anyway, I'm going to scroll all the way down here, and it's giving me some dimensions. It's telling me the content is 24 pixels high. But I also have to add 15 pixels on either side because the padding is making it even bigger. So the inner content there is 24 plus 15 for the top padding plus 15 for the bottom padding. We also have to factor in this links nav right underneath it because the links nav is also taking up space. So that is an additional 24 plus 10 plus 10. So we say 10 plus 10 plus 24 plus 15 plus 24 plus 15 gives us 98 pixels. In other words, the space that this bar and this bar are taking up is exactly 98 pixels. So I come over here and I say, I want the height of my breaking column, the one that's got borders on either side, to be 100% of the vertical window, the viewport window, the viewport height actually, minus 98 pixels. And if I save that, it's actually going to be 99 because the border on that bottom bar takes up one more pixel. My scroll bar is gone. If you were following along with me, calc is one of the most fickle, picky pieces of code in CSS. So if you were doing a calc, you must have a space around this minus. If you do not have a space around this minus, it goes, I don't know how to do math, I'm dumb, and completely ignores your height. Annoys me to no end, but calc is really powerful in that it will let you do calculations as long as you have the spaces correct and the units in there. Okay, that's the most advanced piece of CSS that we will be going over. If that kind of went over your head, that is okay. But it gives you an idea of, hey, if I need to do some math in order to figure out the height or the sizing of a component, I'm able to use calc and say, hey, make it a based off of the viewport minus the height of some other sections. Any questions on that?
Wait, how'd you get the line between the image and the ads?
The border right here.
I got a question on mine.
Okay.
I don't know if it's because I have a very tall image and it's cutting the content out. Here, I can share my screen.
You may need to use a min height instead of just a height. Yes. Use instead of height, do min dash height.
I see. Okay. What's the difference between that?
Yeah, so the min height is going to say, hey, if the content is bigger than whatever calculation you're doing here, you can grow past this height. But if it's shorter than that period, use this as the absolute minimum that the height this will be.
I see. So it's like looking at that if that is small.
If the
Small enough to fit
content
within
in
the
it is
environment.
smaller, then use the min height. If the content is
see.
bigger, use whatever the height of that is going to be.
Okay, so the selector is a conditional.
Yes. Terry, did you figure it out or you have a question? You good? Okay. All right. So we're getting this to shape up. Feeling pretty good about this. I've got some weird spacing things that I need to narrow in on here. So I'm going to say, all right, this design-wise, it looks okay, but I've got spaces in there that I don't necessarily want. And this is going to go back to Safi's question of, can we use a p tag? Yeah, we can, right? But we sometimes get spacing between them that we don't want. And we can actually see that spacing because if we right-click and inspect and hover over that, you can see that orange box down beneath the blue, right? That orange box is telling us, hey, we have some margin there. And this is really cool. This got mentioned in the chat earlier. We can actually preview what it will look like if we remove that margin. So I can come over to my box model over the bottom right here, change this to 0 and hit enter, and it will take that margin out for me. Or I can click on that dash and be like, I wonder what 50 pixels of margin looks like. And it will show us live in the browser. However, this is not editing our code. If I come back over here and hit the refresh button, it goes back to the way it was before. This is a way that we can kind of test around and play with our HTML without affecting our code. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to fix a typo first. Okay, now I want to play around with that spacing. So I am going to say, hey, I would like to go to my breaking call, and any p tags that you find inside the breaking call, set the margin down to 5 pixels, the margin on the bottom in particular. Now that brought all of my content back up together. And I'm feeling like, all right, that's looking a lot better. The other thing is that in my design, I've got my name kind of in gray. And that's important because visually black text is really supposed to be really important, right? But when I'm reading a news article, oftentimes I don't really care about who wrote it. All I care about is the content itself. But I still want to give the author credit. So I'm going to come in here, and this I will add a span to that says author. And then my author, I'm going to make a color of maybe dark gray and save that. Okay, dark gray is not dark enough. Let's make that just regular gray. Oh, I'm blind. Breaking call. Oh, sorry. I said class of author. I don't know why I typed span there. There we go. That made it gray. Class of author. Make my author, make it gray. Why did I make it a class instead of an ID? Well, there are probably other places that I want to use the author's name, so I want to reuse that in there. Any questions on this? All right. So I'm going to go back to the news site. I think this is looking pretty good. Everything is lining up. What I would like you to do is practice getting 2 images to show up on your own. So in the next 20 minutes, I would like you to get your images to show up on your own. If you have not been following along in class and you go, oh my God, I got to go build this entire website, don't panic. Open my live share or go to the C6 My Code in Careers in Code in Canvas, and you can copy all of my code if you have not been following along. But I would like you guys to practice making sure you can get the advertisements text to show up. It should be centered, and you should have 2 images showing up in your right column. I'm going to go ahead and push my code into GitHub so that you have access to it. And so if you are in Canvas and have not been following along, oh, Canvas, why you got to do me dirty like that? You can head to Canvas, click on the My Code link, or you can open up my live share and copy the code out from there. Make sure you copy both the index and the style. Or you can go to GitHub and get it from there, copy and paste it. And again, you are working on your images. I'm going to relaunch the poll here. If you are able to get the images working, go ahead and vote, and then you can get out of class. Make sure you get 2 images. Make sure they are 2 separate images. pull them from Unsplash, use your own personal images, does not matter to me. Once you got that working, you are able to head out of here. Have an awesome weekend, and I will see you all on Monday. No class on Fridays. You need help, feel free to raise your hand and I can help you through it, including finding the code if you have not been following along.
I was gonna say for div class, for what is it, advertisements?
Yep.
So we don't have to do another call. We just do the same process we did for image for the middle section of for articles.
Yeah, so you should already have the call created from our outline. So we've got the word ads in place already. So your images are going to go inside of this call 3.
Okay.
And then you'll have to remember, how do I get the image not to take up the whole screen or the whole default width of the image? How do I make it only take up the space that the column allows? You are welcome to stick around if you got it working and would like to hear other people's questions. Otherwise, you're welcome to head out a little early. Or if you would like to work on your homework and do not have that completed and have questions about your homework, you are welcome to work on that as well.
I was gonna say too, for the homework, like would it, even though like it's not completely perfect, like would it also count to if you like commenting to keep track, like trying to understand and explain your like the process in the homework?
Yeah, that's a great way to make sure that not only I can see that you understand how to do it, but you understand it yourself. So if you would like to add comments into your code, I will never say no to adding additional context.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna stay here. I'm just gonna try to do my first image attempt, and then if I have questions, I'll screen share.
Sounds good. One cool thing that I wanted to share yesterday, I had coder's block, right? Which is a thing just like authors get with writer's block, where I was just like, cannot focus, cannot get this thing done. You know, needed something fun to kind of distract me and get some momentum going. So yesterday I hooked up the bot that uploads the videos to YouTube to OpenAI DALL-E. And so now the class topic that is in the spreadsheet will generate the thumbnail in YouTube. So if you've wondered why the thumbnails look a little weird, it is because DALL-E is generating all the thumbnails for our class topics. Which I thought was a really fun thing to do. And then today I spent all 7 hours working in DevOps and not making any progress. So there are some days that you are really proud of your code or really proud of your work and how far you've come. And there are other days where you just bang your head against the keyboard. So just wanted to share the 2 days in the life of a senior developer. But anyway, yeah, if you head to YouTube, you can see the pretty cool thumbnails that DALL-E is generating based off of our class topics. The other thing I wanted to mention was, and this Cornelius goes back to your point of what happens when languages update. So I Googled CSS nesting over the break. And the first thing that came up was this MDM thing, and it's showing us CSS nesting and the general notion that you can put child selectors in parent selectors. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Sorry.
Totally fine.
And so I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I was talking about, right? This is nesting child selectors and parent selectors. Am I going crazy? Right? I'm like, what? But this never used to work. So there is a website called caniuse.com, and it actually gives you a breakdown of support of newer features, whether it's CSS, HTML, or JavaScript, support for those features across different browsers. And so I typed in CSS nesting here. And the first thing that came up was CSS nesting, and it says baseline 2023, newly available across all major browsers. And I'm like, oh, I'm not crazy. This didn't used to be supported, but this is a great example of jQuery, which is an older JavaScript framework, no longer being used as much. Well, why not? Because jQuery was kind of the pioneer of these features, and JavaScript said, well, those would be good features for the language itself to support instead of having to install an additional framework. And so this website will show you if you're using Internet Explorer back all the way on version 11, nested selectors will not work. But it also shows you that globally, only 0.5% of the globe is still using Internet Explorer 11. So all of this green in here is telling you that nested selectors are supported on all of these different browsers. So not anything that you need to worry about. All of the CSS selectors that we are using have wide support across all major browsers going back for like 20 years. But now I learned today that 86% of the globe's browsers do support nested selecting in your CSS. They're kind of cool.
I did drop the link to YouTube's policy in chat. It does not seem to explicitly state that. I think it's really targeting the content within the video. However, one thing that stood out was generates a realistic looking scene that didn't actually occur.
Interesting. I will have to look into this.
I think all you need to do is add a tag on the video that says AI, that like just says AI content in it. But I don't know what that does, like to, not that you're trying to hit the algorithm with like the content of the classes, but I don't know if that like suppresses anything or what happens on the back end with that. Didn't mean to make you question your cool thumbnail idea.
No.
I was curious.
It's really interesting because I was going to use a tool to basically lay out the text and generate the JPEG image, and then I'm like, oh, I could just use DALL-E to generate the whole thing, and then it would be content, contextually relevant. But I looked into the copyright of DALL-E. I didn't look into the YouTube policies, so I will dig into this and see what we have to do, or if we have to do anything.
Alright, thank-
I don't think you have to do anything with like with the thumbnail as long as like your own thing, as long as your AI like made it. I don't think is a problem because I did like some a little bit of like AI on my YouTube videos too. So
Max, could you explain what did that margin bottom for your breaking call, what that was for again?
Yeah, so this one right here.
Yeah.
So if I hit Command Space, it's going to put in what we call the CSS comment syntax, right? A little different than the HTML syntax. But the other benefit of using comments is that it will disable that code from running in the browser. So if I take that out and take a look at my site, you'll see that there's a lot of space between each one of the paragraphs. By default, paragraph tags have 15 or 16 pixels of margin on the bottom of them. So if we're reading them in an article, our paragraphs have a little bit of space between them. That is just injected by default by the browser. I wanted to override that. I didn't want the space to be in there. So I said, hey, instead of making it 15 or 16 pixels by default, make it 5 instead. And that just brought all of those P tags a little closer together.
Okay. All right. Can you look at mine also? And I want to put some space between my ad images. But the line break did not work.
Okay, yeah. So you can use margin bottom on your image, and you can
Oh,
apply
yeah.
an ID or a class to the image and apply it that way.
Yeah.
Or the line break
Yeah.
should work.
Yeah, I used margin bottom. I did an ID to the top image. That way, less of a much hassle. But I'm all set with
So,
mine. So have a good night.
um,
Could I just get a
well,
quick?
Oh, go ahead.
Michael, did you have a question?
Yeah, can I ask you to clap eyes on mine so I can get a blessing and see if I'm on the right path? So I'll share
Yeah.
my screen real quick.
Go for it. Yep, you're good to go.
All right, thank you very much.
Have a great night. See ya.
Yeah, you too.
Let me minimize this.
All right, let me take a look at your code. Okay, so you are applying the margin bottom to the ads column. So this margin bottom is actually showing up at the bottom of the column, which is right down here.
Mm.
What did you want to apply it to instead?
The images. I just wanted to put a space with the
So what
image.
you can do is right here in your CSS after the words ads col, throw a space between the selector and the curly brace and put space img. Now you said to every image inside the ads col, add a little space at the bottom. And if you save that, there's your space.
Oh, okay.
And you're good to go.
Alrighty. Thank you.
So why do that instead of add a ID to the image? Do the same exact thing. Just one way is writing a more advanced selector so you don't have to add additional classes. The other way is a little bit cleaner to understand because it's a very specific ID. So either way works totally fine.
Okay. Well, appreciate it.
Last call for questions. Tiffany, go ahead.
Actually, I just say I'm already done. Do I need to share my screen?
Nope, you're good. I trust you.
Thank you.
Have a good night. I'll see you on Monday. Last call for questions, especially if anyone is struggling with their images. Now's
I
the
just
time
want to
get
show
help.
you mine. So
Yeah, go for it.
I think I got it. Sorry, I'm eating.
No, you're fine. That's why I have to go at 8:30. My food's waiting for me. Yep, beautiful. Well done.
Alrighty, thank you.
Have a great night.
Hey, I had one last question. There's this bit of an issue when it comes to my VS Code where the go live button is constantly disappearing. Do you know how I would fix that?
Can you? Is it happening now?
Yeah,
Can you share your screen and take a look?
sure thing.
Okay, it's disappeared because it's currently running right now. So that means that you're on the when it says no entry port 5500, that is your live server running. So if you click on that no entry port 5500 down at the bottom, it will stop the live server and give you your button back to then go live again.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. All right, thanks so much.
Yep, no problem. All right. Have a great evening, everyone. I will see you guys on Monday. Enjoy your weekends.